What's up, guys? Welcome to Creative Night.
What up?
Woo! We're so stoked that you guys are here. Raise your hand if it's your first time at Creative Night. Woo! First timers. These guys too. So just a little bit of background on what Creative Night is.
You need to move.
That's not good.
Yeah, Francis, can you move, please?
There's a seat outside, bud.
Gotta wait for Francis to leave the room. So a background of what Creative Night is, it's just an opportunity for students to come together, whether you're a creative, consider yourself a creative or not. It's just an opportunity for us to come together, learn about art and faith and how they intersect, and how we play a part in sharing the gospel through our gifts and our talents. And we've been doing this for almost about a year and a half now. And it's just been so fruitful just to see God move in so many students and see, students who aren't really studying creative majors really get into photography, videography, design, all that awesome stuff. So we want to welcome you guys and really excited for tonight. So guys, wanted to introduce you guys to David Calavitta and Patrick Gulpo, who are our guests for tonight. So let's give them a round of applause. You want to introduce yourselves to the students, a little bit about yourselves?
Sure.
Me first?
Yeah.
All right. My name is Patrick. I run this small creative agency with my business partner, David. I've been doing kind of creative and marketing for, 15 or so years now, but my background a little different than David. I kind of started more so in the secular world, so most of my work and experience has been in different brands in that field, not necessarily faith-based in the beginning. So working with a lot of action sports, so
anti-faith based.
Yeah, heretical brands. Adidas, things like that for several years. And then Dave and I met at church in ministry, in
Singles night.
2012 or 13 or so. And so that's where it kind of started, where we met and been doing some kind of work together. But it was only a year or so ago that we decided to kind of make it official and do an agency out of it.
That's a great lineup for Singles night. Yeah, make it official. Hi, I'm David. I have a background in ministry. I've worked for the church in various ways for about the past 20 years or so. Fun fact, Francis was my very first small group leader when I was 14 years old at my very first Catholic retreat. So he looks the exact same.
That's how old he is.
Yeah, he doesn't age. He's a vampire.
For real.
Yeah, but
It's the Filipino skin.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Filipinos and vampires, they share that in common?
100%.
What about a Filipino vampire? What does that do?
I think that's a whole different conversation.
Okay, well, they're here for it. I'm just saying. So yeah, my background's in ministry, and that kind of led me to just see the need for creativity and really just the idea of art, design, communication. And I met PG or Patrick. Came to the church when I was working at and started getting involved with some of the young adult ministry and stuff that we were running there. And we've been working on projects ever since, just kind of on the side. And then God just kind of lined up some things and some different needs in our lives separately. I've got a wife with 2 kids, 2 boys. He's got a wife with 3 little girls. And God just kind of arranged it so that we could just kind of go on our own and start this agency. And it's been a fun process, fun journey. Prior to this agency, I was working for a company called Life Teen. I was the director of marketing there for the last 10 years. And so it felt kind of like a pretty natural step.
Yeah, David and Patrick played a big role in my love for design. So it's really awesome that they're here. And they've played a big part in a lot of, inspired a lot of artists in the church too with what they do. So thank you guys for being here. Before we kind of go into the weeds of all the questions, I want to open up just kind of a icebreaker for you guys. Might be a little bit controversial, but that's, we want to hear hot topics, right? So whoever wants to start first. What are your top 5 fast food chains?
Oh, dude. 5 of them?
Top 5.
Yeah, that I mean, who eats 5 different fast foods? I feel like you got to commit.
In-N-Out.
That's
one?
yeah,
Okay.
like
Number 1?
1 through 5.
I'll go 1 through 4 is In-N-Out, and then 5 is Del Taco.
Why Del Taco at 5?
Because I know the family that started it. They're actually a really devout Catholic family. They were in my youth group, or the granddaughter was up in Victorville. Like really cool family.
Okay.
So I have an affinity to that. And plus combo burritos, am I right?
That's true. That's true. Okay. I think it needs to be a little bit more direct.
Okay.
We asked our creative team this past Sunday.
Okay.
And it was a really heated conversation. But okay.
Chick-fil-A?
Yeah. Top 5 fast food fries.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
that's
man.
different. I don't know. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I'm boring.
You're going to be that guy.
No, I'm gonna tell you right now, y'all are gonna learn, like, as dads, like, you just don't eat a lot of different things. Like, you just, whatever the kids leave over, you just kind of that. So my kids, they love In-N-Out, and so that's what's in the house if we're going fast food. So I don't have a lot to go by. I will say, it's not fast food, but Red Robin fries, that's God's gift to
That's
creation
good.
right there.
Yeah. Bottomless?
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Eternal. Not bottomless,
Oh, yeah,
eternal
that's
fries,
true.
okay?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing, dude. I don't know the fry game very much, but In-N-Out obviously is what we eat the most, no matter what. But I don't know.
We're
That's like the
boring.
go-to.
We're boring. But I
Yeah,
know
we're
that
boring.
they
I
don't
don't
have
know
the
what's in
best
the
fries.
fast
I know that they
Right.
don't have the best
I
fries.
know that's like
but
a
like,
controversial.
It's controversial.
but the best fry is the fry you're eating,
Right. That's true.
and that's the fries we eat.
That's true.
So
That's fair.
take it up with my wife.
Awesome. Great. So you guys mentioned you just started a really awesome agency, Seen and Unseen. Want to hear more about it? What inspired you to start it? Because obviously both of you guys had your own careers in ministry and even in the secular world as well. What was kind of the inception of starting Seen and Unseen?
Yeah. I think like there was a lot of practical reasons in terms of just having families and wanting to balance out time and finances and presence with your kids. Like not like presents gifts, but like presents you. Like you being, well, you are a gift, I guess. I don't know. You get what I'm saying? Being present with your family. And sometimes depending on the career or just the company you're working with, that can sometimes be hard to balance. And so that was a big catalyst. But within that, we had always, like I said, been working together on side projects, and it just kind of felt like if he was going to do it or if I was going to do it, like us doing it together made a lot of sense. And we had an interesting potential circumstance. That was a company came to me because I'd done some ministry work for them. They had done some webinars or whatever, and so they knew they had a relationship with me or I had a relationship with them. And they were like, hey, it was an interesting scenario. It's an evangelical faith-based company, but they're working a lot in the Catholic market. And they realized that the evangelical designers, they were really talented, but they didn't understand Catholic context very well. And sometimes that would cause issues. You know, like if you have like a company's logo floating over an altar, in the Catholic Church, that's probably not a good move. And so, and it was no shade at them, but they just realized, oh, we need someone who understands the Catholic world. And so they kind of said, we might have this opportunity to bring in some like real heavy like design projects. Is that something you're interested in? And then I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. So I went to him and I was like, hey, we should probably do this. So we put together everything for the agency and in order to land that client, and then they ghosted us for like 3 months. But in the process, we landed another client, which we were super stoked about. And then once this other client came back, because they had to fix some things internally, they were like, hey, we're really interested in talking. We're interviewing a few other agencies. By the way, we just became one of the main sponsors of this giant Catholic conference happening. And we're like, oh, that's funny. They're actually our client. And they're like, oh, really? So then all of a sudden they're really interested. And so I just feel like God kind of like prompted us. We got it all together. And then he just kind of opened up some doors really quickly that led to some really cool projects and relationships. And so here we are. Yeah.
It's kind of backwards because we kind of built the agency because we knew that this client was starting to kind of canvas different agencies and bring them in to see which ones would work. And so we had the opportunity to throw our names in, but we weren't an agency at the time, so we're like, let's see if we could throw something together and put our names in. And so
if it's on Instagram, it's true. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's awesome. So how about you guys share a little bit about the name Seen and Unseen?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it on the website, kind of the mission, but
Yeah.
just to share with the students a little bit what it's about.
Sure. Not to like over spiritualize it, but we we really understand, and we'll talk more about this when we some other questions, but like the creative process is a human process, and humans are sacramental. And by that we mean we're physical and spiritual, right? There's an unseen and there's a seen, right? That's the whole idea of a sacrament, right? An outward sign of an inward grace, right? This visible experiential sign that conveys a spiritual reality, an unseen reality. And for us, just the creative process really is this dance between the internal, the thinking, the heart, the philosophy, the way you approach something that then drives the external, the things that are seen and heard and experienced. And then vice versa, what we see, hear, and experience shape the internal, right? I mean, think about a song you've heard, right? It sounds a certain way and it moves you to maybe a step further in belief or whatever it may be. And so we just kind of see that process, that relationship sort of circular of the invisible moving the visible or shaping the visible. And as a result, the visible then can shape the hearts, the invisible of the audience. Yeah. Trademark.
I know you guys had mentioned just, with your work that you're ranging from, churches or even secular companies as well. What was a project that you guys have worked on recently that best represents, your agency's vision and your approach, since you guys are, brand new agency? So,
we kind of talked about this earlier, and the whole idea of like trying to figure out if there's a single project that kind of encompasses the philosophy or the way we go about going through a process for a different project. But I think more so than a specific project, I think kind of the process that we go through to do any sort of client work is based, similar to the idea of Seen and Unseen, is based on a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. So a lot of just development of vision and understanding of kind of what we call the framework. So when we work with a client, and I guess Oakland is,
Yeah.
we did a project with the cathedral in Oakland, and before we could get to, because originally what they had wanted was like, a branding update, so new logo, website, and things like that. But for us, I think in our process, the bigger chunk of what's important in doing any sort of creative work is the stuff that happens before you even get to the logo. Because in the end, the logo could be, whatever it ends up being. If there's no story for the reason it's there, and it's just there because it looks cool or the design is good, then it really kind of loses the point. It just gets lost in the same thing that everyone else has. And so for us, we always go through this process of what we call the framework, where we'll sit down with the client and we'll work through identifying purpose, vision, mission, and understanding what really drives them before we even get to any sort of design or understanding of what kind of website or verbiage they want to do for what their project is. So I think that part of it, regardless of the client or the project, is kind of the main thing that we try to focus on. That's why sometimes it's hard for us to kind of identify or show like, here's a cool thing we designed that looks good or whatever, because for us it's the stuff that happens before that. And sometimes it's only that. Sometimes it's just sitting with a client to help them identify that. And then whatever happens after, if we end up doing other design stuff or work with them on other things, comes after, and it's just a small part of it.
So I think a good example of that, like, that's NEC. We'll talk about that in a minute, but there's maybe on there you'll see something that says PushPay, and there's a phrase that says Jesus didn't die for data. PushPay is a database company. They deal with churches, and really they provide great software, but just to collect data. And they came to us and like, hey, we want a booth for this conference, and they kind of gave us like, their action items to sell this, to advertise this, and normally like maybe a default answer would be, great, here's a cool looking design and it says buy this, right, or whatever. But then in sitting down and doing the unseen, talking with them, we found out they're so passionately invested in the relationship a church can build with their parish or the parishioners. And this idea that you can't love what you don't know. So data actually allows you to love someone better. And that led us, and that's the internal, right? Understanding that identity of that company and kind of what's driving their heart, that then leads the external, the messaging in this case, like the copywriting and stuff, to become something that attempts to humanize data or show that data is all about relationship, is all about love, is all about, if you're a pastor of a church, the more you know what your demographic is in the pews, the better you can love them, right? I can love a stranger very limitedly. I can love my wife or my mom or my brother way more personally because I know them, right? And so for us, that idea of the internal, the framework, getting to know the client where their heart is, it doesn't just lead to cool design with call to action, but instead it leads to a message that would convey to the heart of the audience. And so that phrase of Jesus didn't die for data was really kind of the driving phrase of that campaign to show like, and it's kind of jarring a little bit. And at first, like when we pitched it to, and these are evangelicals, we pitched it to them, they're like, oh, it sounds sacrilegious. I'm like, well, sit with them for a second. Okay, you see that it's not, right? Because he didn't die for data. He died for humans. So what are we saying? That data is not about data. Data is about humans, and humans are why the church exists. So this is important now to have a great platform to collect data so you can better know humans and love them. So if that kind of makes sense in terms of like the internal and the external, what drives coming up with that copy or that design is understanding that internal, what is the brand's identity and who's the audience and how do we then change that external so you can go from one unseen to the other unseen. And
Yeah. No, I love how you guys touched on that process. And I especially like talking about push pay, really illustrating with them, the whole essence of what, when you were talking about data and like making it more relational, right? And even with the Diocese of Oakland, right? The importance of the branding and how it's supposed to convey a message. With that process, have you guys maybe found it challenging sometimes when you're working with a non-faith-based client, kind of following that same framework?
I mean, not really. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say no. I would say it's probably more challenging with a faith-based client.
How so?
Well, PG could probably speak a lot to it in terms of the background you've done with the industry, but I'll say like a lot of the people, and I say this very kindly, so don't crucify me. I love the church, and so we can be honest about the church, but a lot of times people or ministries or apostolates in the church have a very shallow thinking, and they don't want to go through a process that leads to an intentional result. They want the Amazon Prime version of the result. They want the microwave dinner. No, just give me the post. Give me the post. No, let's talk about who you are and who you're posting for, and then that'll tell us what your post should look like and sound like. They don't want process. Because process is time is money, investment, this, that, and the other. And usually a lot of apostolates like, hey, we need this thing done. Cool, when? Last week. Cool, what's your budget? Nothing, you're gonna pay us. Wait, what? So it's a little bit more challenging, I think, in the faith-based setting sometimes, because the bar is so low when it comes to creative investment nowadays. Not historically, but nowadays. Yeah. And I think you could probably speak to on a secular side how they double down on this.
Yeah, I would say I think one of the dangers we have in this kind of Catholic creative environment is I think we have a tendency to want so badly to elevate something that's kind of we see as mediocre that we often jump to what's cool, what looks good, what's this cool design that I saw, what can I do that's similar, what can I do that's influenced by it, that we kind of skip the process of actually telling the story that comes behind it. Because sometimes you'll see stuff in the secular world and you'll look at it and be like, I could design something cooler than that. I think I could make something that's more relevant than that. But we forget how a lot of times in those scenarios, there's a long process that happens of understanding what they're trying to do before they're putting out. So whether it's just really plain or not, it speaks to something more than just doing the thing that looks cool or looks good or whatever it might be. And I think coming from mostly the secular industry, I think the process that goes before any sort of design is something that's already built in and understood. Nothing goes out without a long, long process of understanding what it is that you're trying to say, who you're talking to, why you're doing it. Whereas when we work with a lot of Catholic churches, you're almost trying to drag them along to try to do this process when what they really want is I just want the thing that at the end. Just give me the logo so I can use it. But they don't even understand who they're trying to show to, what's the audience, what are you trying to say with your logo. And I think that's the thing that if there was anything that we have to learn to do better is try to understand the process, because I think then we can actually create some sort of change in the landscape of Catholic creatives versus constantly yes, we might start doing stuff now that's relevant and looks cool little by little. But if there isn't any kind of deeper meaning in it, then little by little, I think it just becomes the same homogenized thing over time, where little by little you'll see this post from this church looks the same as this one from this church, looks the same as that one from that church, because it's just the thing that everyone's doing at that time. And so it's okay for something to not look super on trend or super relevant or whatever at the time if there's a reason for why you're doing it, I think. And so I think that side of it is a little bit different in the secular.
And I would add to that, like, relevance is used a lot in creativity. Excuse me. That was in and out. I apologize. Relevance is used a lot in creativity, and that relevance literally means like to be able to be in relationship with. I think like relevance, like, oh, it's cool. No. Like what's cool for audience A may not be cool for audience B. What really matters is, are you creating something that audience A can find themselves in relationship with? And that may not work for audience B. And a lot of times what PG's saying is like, we just sort of like can hop on a trend. Trends aren't bad, but we can just regurgitate and we kind of get this like echo chamber of a certain thing. And it may have worked for audience A, but now we're passing on to B and C and D and E, and we may have lost that ability to like give them something to actually find a relationship with. And that's where the thinking, that's where the process comes in. And I would say last thing before we move on is that secular industries spend billions of dollars understanding marketing and branding and communication. And they've got it down to a science in order to make it work, but they don't know why it works. The church, on the other hand, spends zero mostly on marketing, creativity, branding, and communication, but deep down in the truth of who we are, we know why it works, because humanity is drawn to truth, goodness, and beauty. And any times we are presented with truth, goodness, and beauty, and usually in a certain order in which beauty leads, the heart moves, we're drawn to that. All humans are. And so the secular world spends billions of dollars to perfect how to do it, and they're stumped on why it works. It's magic to them at a certain point. But the church is like, no, it's not magic. Like, we know exactly how it works, right. But we often sit back and then don't do it.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like, I always find it so crazy that, like, the Catholic Church, you know, if you think about, like, in the early church, this is the church that commissioned literally, like, Michelangelo and Caravaggio to create some of the most just, like, insane pieces of art. And then now it's like, we get clip art on our bulletin, right? Or like, or just like, you know, really just funny sayings on t-shirt, like retreat t-shirts, right? So.
Oh, dude, the Yoki ones.
Yeah. I got a whole drawer full of those. So
those make Jesus cry.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, it always just blows my mind, just like seeing all this beauty. You know, if you've ever been to like St. Peter's Basilica, just like the immense beauty, just being there, right? And even you go to the Sistine Chapel, just looking up and seeing the ceiling is just amazing. And then just seeing how the church is now, and just seeing, are they really trying to invest in this new generation of artists? You know, are they really looking to commission and create beautiful work now? Because you were saying like evangelical churches will spend literally millions of dollars to get amazing work out, right? So kind of like along those lines, right now where the church is, where do you see creativity playing a role in evangelization and building the church for the next generation?
I don't know. I think part of it, at least for us, this is kind of why we focus so much on the kind of like the behind the scenes stuff, is because I think if we can little by little change the mindset, because I think it's hard to get a real shift in how the church thinks about marketing and communication and creativity unless we're able to adjust the mindset and help them to grow in understanding the importance of the stuff that has to happen before the design or whatever else comes out. And I think if we can get there, that's where I think it can start to help the actual, you know, evangelization side of what creativity could do. Because I think right now, even if stuff starts looking good and starts looking better, we're still kind of a little bit in that place of like, hey, let's just bring in someone who we know designs good, and then we'll just have them, you know, make whatever we need them to make, which I think is good. It's still, I think for us as Catholics, like anything that's a little step above what's already there, I think is a win for sure. But I think to really change the culture of like Catholic creativity, we have to really start finding ways, whether it's in our parishes or whether it's like any of us who do creative work for the church, try to push for things like a deeper understanding of why you're doing different design, or why you're doing, I don't know, an event or whatever it is that you're going to do. Because I think if we do it that way, then I think little by little, hopefully, it starts to kind of bring out the real meaning of why you're trying to do all this stuff in the first place. It's not just like, you know, a pretty design put on something that's terrible when like someone shows up, you know. So.
Yeah. Catechism question. What does evangelization mean? Check, 1, 2. Is this thing on? Anyone know what that word means? No? Evangelization means to share the good news. To share the good news. So you have a message, the good news, and then you have sharing it. That's communication, right? And I think literally at the core of evangelization is the ability to have good news that needs to be communicated to someone who is in bad news, right? We're all sinners, separated from God for all eternity. The wages of sin is death. We're all going to hell. Buckle up. That's the bad news, and that's humanity's like reality. The good news is Jesus came to die, to take our punishment from sin, to restore a relationship with the Father and give us grace so that we can have eternal life, right? That's the good news. Now, how do you get it from A to B, right? That's the message. That right there, I think, is the crux of evangelization, and that's the crux of creativity, because if you think about it, if I have the best news in the world and I cannot say it in a way in which you can hear it, I failed, right? But if I insist, no, you just have to understand me, which is sometimes how the church acts. You just have to understand me. You get on my level. Right? We're missing that point. The incarnation is God coming down to man, right? Because we couldn't ascend to his level. And I think evangelization, the church's effort needs to bring the truth of the gospel down to, we'll say, incarnated to the culture, so the way the culture can actually receive it. I think creativity is the machine, the mechanism. It's the heart that translates that. You know, at the end of the day, communication has 3 parts: the sender, the receiver, and the message in between. The sender has something to say. The receiver needs to hear it, and in this case, for eternal life. And so the sender then needs to be really crafty and artful and intentional about how they create this message and send it out so it can be received. Because it's not enough for us to sit on the top of a pulpit and just yell out stuff that can't be soaked in. And it's not enough to just say, well, I wish they could have heard me. Right? If we really care, we have to figure out what incarnating that message looks like. And I think that's really the church. When I say the church's history earlier, like that's what the church did beautifully. That's the reason why we have Sistine Chapels. It's the reason why we have these beautiful mass parts. It's the reason why we have these cathedrals. It's the reason why the church like leveraged technology at the time: stained glass windows, new construction technologies, new musical instruments. Like the church pioneered all that. 1, to glorify God, because that's what quality does. Quality gives God glory, and quality also draws people in. It's a magnifying glass, and it's a megaphone, right? We're going to give glory to God, and we're going to draw you in, right? And that's I think, when you want evangelization to be successful, like we can't underestimate the need to become creative in the midst of it. And that doesn't just mean you put it into an Instagram post, right? Creativity is even just the words you choose to say. You can have a homily and say, well, think about this. Let me back up. Any of you ever been told, I love you? If you haven't, I love you. I'm sorry. But think about all the ways you've been told I love you. Or you've been told the same 3 words again and again in various situations. But I'm going to venture to say that they've meant different things in different moments. And that may have been who was saying it, or how they said it, or even the fact that they didn't use words to say it, or where your circumstance was when you heard it, right? That's the importance of that. We can say the same thing over and over again, but if we don't incarnate it to an ability for an audience to hear it, like we're missing the point. You know what I mean? We're going to be, well, kind of like where the church is right now. You go across the country and there are dioceses consolidating, shutting down churches left and right. You know?
Right.
Soapbox over.
Right. I really like how you were mentioning evangelization and how that plays such a big part in just creating beautiful art, especially in this day and age, right? In the digital realm, what you were just saying of like, it's not just simply posting it on Instagram. It has to be a wider message, right? And I want to back up a little bit, and I want to touch on the National Eucharistic Congress, if we could pull some of those up, because I think this was like an amazing project that you guys worked on, of how you use the space, just common spaces, to evangelize to people. Just want to hear, kind of just share about the process and just how you guys got to do this amazing project.
Yeah.
So the NEC actually, it started, the organization had been ongoing for a while before we were brought on. And so they actually had a lot of the actual, like their style guide and stuff already set in stone. And we were brought on later on to try and figure out how they could kind of advertise and promote their message for the revival in the actual environment of the Congress, the actual conference event. And so we were brought on, and we had to take stuff that was already done and find a way to portray kind of a different message. And again, similar to what we talked about before, we went through a process with them where we came out of this process understanding that what they really wanted to do was find, or what we discovered is, because they're kind of taking over the city, what they really wanted to do is find some sort of way to create, just like we're actually talking about, a more kind of evangelistic message. So what we proposed was not just putting up signage where it's like NEC conference, cool design, and welcome to Indiana or whatever, but to instead do some sort of campaign that speaks directly to the people who are going, but even the people who might not know what's happening in the city. And so it became this kind of big copy campaign that we put throughout the city where people might show up as they're arriving. So in the airport, on big buildings throughout the city, on the streets, different bridges. So it went from being this kind of generic, like promotional design thing to a bigger, more message-driven advertising campaign.
And even within that, there were sort of like two realms or two audiences. And this is, again, to reemphasize like that internal idea of like asking, who are you, what are you trying to say, and who are you trying to say it for, and who are, like, what's their life like? And even in that, you'll see the majority of the signs on the buildings, that was context. This happened in Indianapolis, the big Catholic conference, 60,000 people flying into Indianapolis for like a week. And so the signs on the buildings outside, that's on the convention center where all the attendees are. So those signs speak very specifically about the story is revival. The story is the fact that Jesus is here for you and wants to bring you new life. Second to that is the campaign in the airport itself. They have a lot of signage that they purchased there. And that one right there, we had this really, like, the thought was not just welcome the people who are coming to the Congress, because the people coming to the Congress know why they're in Indianapolis. They're not surprised when they land. Do you know what I mean? So they don't really need anything. But we want to find a way to hype them up and get them excited and kind of, oh yeah, you're here. But do it in a way that actually speaks to the people who aren't here for the Congress. Because we're in a very public setting. People walking by left and right in the airport. So how do we welcome people to the Congress without making it about the people at the Congress, using that to become evangelistic for all the people not for the Congress? And so in the airport, right here, some baggage should be left behind. That has nothing to do with specifically why someone's coming to the Congress, other than the fact that you understand the idea of reconciliation and confession. But we thought, what greater phrase could at least cause someone, as they're picking up their luggage, to read that and be like, well, I don't want to leave my baggage, and just have a thought, just an interaction mentally with, wait, what's this about? And they either will scan the QR code and it'll take them to this page about what it's about, or they'll see like Catholic Eucharist at Congress, and maybe the Holy Spirit can like connect some dots in their head, right? Same with the one coming down the escalators. There's this big like 30 by 20 foot sticker decal on the floor, and this one's heaven on earth, no boarding pass needed.
This was like a long process of different lines that were...
Because the airport don't want to play with evangelistic phrases, I'll tell you right now. Like the first phrases we went in were like, what do we say?
turbulent.
Yeah, no, turbulence isn't the only reason to pray, right? That was, right? Like, but then the airport, and now in fairness, God bless whoever's at the airport, but like they already didn't really want to play games with the National Eucharistic Congress. They had some probably, just hurt or something. And so it was already very difficult. So we put that forward, and they're like, wow, no, it can't be, like, you're mocking people's fear of flying. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then we came up with another, I forget the other one, but it was more about this idea of...
Is it a seatbelt? I don't know.
I was more about this, and there's the idea of praying, and they're like, "Oh no, we don't. You can't mention God," whatever it was. All these stipulations. So this is what we landed on: heaven on earth, no boarding pass needed, hinting to this idea of the church and the Eucharist being heaven on earth, but at least just giving people a thought. Because if it just says National Eucharistic Congress, that only matters to the people who are coming for National Eucharistic Congress. Those words mean absolutely crap to everyone else who needs to hear the gospel walking by. Right? Those who know what it means, they already have access to the gospel, and that's great. So that was kind of like, even within that, like the city campaign and the airport campaign, and understanding audiences and the intention behind those would change what we put. And what's cool is like these people at the Congress, they were down to like many faith-based institutions that we've been involved in would have a problem with that distinction. Because like, well, no, but this is about the Congress. We just want people to know we need a big welcome to the Catholic, and put a picture of a monstrance and this, that, and the other. And it's like, let's be secure enough in our faith to actually put a story forward that would engage a heart, whereas an image of a monstrance may shut a heart off. Or at best may just alienate someone because like, I don't know what that bowling trophy is. I'm out, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Yeah. It was a fun project for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it spoke a lot to that process that we're talking about. And
Yeah.
even the end result, like whether or not, the design could have gone this way or that way, but understanding like who this is for, who's going to see this, and then mixed with what the copy says.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we ended up at the result that we did.
Because design-wise, like we inherited everything. Like there was already a great marketing agency and design that put like branding in place, and they've been working for years, and they did all like the marketing up to the event, and then we were brought on to do like everything on site.
Yeah.
And so obviously we can't just like go from scratch and create our own vibe. It was okay, take what they have, try to pull out what we feel is like strong elements of it, and then put it into action.
Yeah. No, I remember seeing it for the first time, and I was like, I wish I was there, because it was so sick. And I think it was something that like had never been done before in terms of evangelizing in that way, right? Like I like how you were saying that, how they wanted to have a monstrance on the floor,
That's
but how
that's
like
the default
right
like, when you work
right.
with the church. Yeah.
Right. But how you approached it of how having that would shut a heart off, right? But making it more evangelical would open up that conversation for people to encounter Jesus in a new way, right? And I think that's something that I pray the church continues to learn, right? The storytelling aspect and using that to evangelize. So to that end, with that work that you guys did, how do you see that playing a part in the church going forward in the creative space and in the design space?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that question. I think the one thing out of what we got to work with there, and I would like to see in more places, is the fearlessness of the team that we got to work with, the leaders of the NEC, the fearlessness that once we pitched this idea, it's not a normal Catholic Church solution that we've come accustomed to. No, we just wanted to say this, and we want the monstrance or the whatever. And they were fearless enough to be confident in who they were, that they didn't have to force that upon their audience. Because again, you could alienate. I use this example sometimes, like a lot of my history is in youth ministry, and if I were to get up at a church and say, come to adoration, and I follow up and I ask you, like, is that a good invitation or a bad invitation? And the answer is it depends. It depends who you're inviting. If you're inviting my mom, who knows what adoration is, has an affinity for adoration, and will crawl on her knees to adoration every Tuesday night, that's all you need. But if I'm trying to lead a teen to encounter Jesus present in the Blessed Sacrament, and has no context for what adoration is, really has no context for the Eucharist, other than being this weird word they had to memorize in CCD class or something, and now I tell them to come to this thing that is foreign, disconnected, and has no relevance to their life, I probably haven't done a good job inviting them to it. Instead, I can have the confidence to say, I don't have to put the Eucharist forward. I know what the Eucharist brings people. Maybe it's peace. Okay, so then maybe I talk about, do you have a lot of anxiety in your life? Come tonight, it was a really cool prayer night where we're just gonna speak to you about the peace that Jesus wants to bring you and give you a special way to maybe receive that peace. Now, when they come, it's still adoration, but you haven't said, come to this foreign thing with this foreign concept that has no relevancy in your life. Instead, you said, you're a human being with anxiety. Jesus has a solution. He wants to meet you there. It happens to be adoration, But you got to be, fearless enough to do that, because we're so conditioned. We're afraid that people won't know it's Catholic unless we have rosaries and monstrances all over it. We're like, well, what if like you just understood the Catholic faith was so wide and so deep, and you're not hurting the Eucharist by speaking about what the Eucharist accomplishes in someone's heart, right? You wouldn't say you're disregarding confession by asking someone if they want to have healing, but that's exactly what confession does. So you may invite them, hey, do you have like guilt? Do you want to be healed from that? Let's talk. Versus, hey, do you want to tell your sins to a stranger? Right? Those are same mechanics. One is the fruit of the other, and that's the human story. Like we're longing for that, for healing. We may not know that the healing is coming through the mechanics of confession because it's not on our radar yet. Bless you. No problem. Do you need healing? Okay.
That's awesome. Kind of going towards the end now, but just wanted to shift it of just your overall life as a creative, just any key lessons or any failures that you may have encountered throughout your years of being a creative that kind of shaped on who you are now, especially starting an agency. Just want to share some of that.
Wait, am I, all right.
Yeah. If you say starting an agency with your friend as a failure, I'm going to be really hurt, bro.
I don't know. I would say, for me at least, coming from my background in the more secular space, I think one of the bigger lessons that I kind of gleaned from being in there for so long is I think the idea of being willing and open to understanding what goes into kind of developing the skill or the craft of creative, whether it's design or not. And I didn't study design or anything, but more so just the creative, whatever it is. And I think understanding the idea of like taking criticism, I think a lot of times in the Catholic world, again, we're in such a space where we feel like anything that moves the needle is great, and we get praise for anything that might look good or whatever it is. But I think the idea of being able to be more open with each other creatively on when things look good or doesn't look good, because I think for me, when I first started in San Francisco, when I went to school, I went to ad school there. And in my first class, like, you go in and the teacher's like, oh, we're doing this, give me 15, concepts for an ad for this company. And you come in the next week and you put them up. And right away in front of the class, be like, this one sucks, this one sucks, this one sucks, rips them off the wall, bring me 15 more next week. And then you just keep going. And I think over time, working in the secular world, this is how it goes. Like you
get better.
Refine your craft, and you do it over and over again. You don't take it personal. You understand that there's a message that's trying to be delivered, and you're just trying to find the best way to deliver the message. And it takes refining and growing and understanding and learning. And I think for us as like Catholic creatives in the church, I think we're definitely like drawn to, things that look cool or things that look good and getting better in certain ways. But I do think there's a space for, whether it's things like this or openness to kind of, critique and understanding what's good and what's not good. And Dave and I were talking about it earlier, on this idea of like focusing more on the gift versus the label. So like not focusing so much like, oh, I want to be a Catholic designer, I want to be a Catholic creative, I want to do Catholic design, Catholic this, but instead just, if you want to be a designer, you want to be a creative, understand how to do design, like learn creative things and study and do all these things that make it so that when you actually start designing or start doing an ad or doing copy, you're just a really good one and you happen to be Catholic. And it's not like, I'm a good Catholic one, I'm going to do Catholic this, make a Catholic shirt or a Catholic logo. I'm not saying it's bad, but I think if we're able to kind of grow just in the natural space of where creativity happens out in the world, and you just happen to be Catholic, I think that's the way that we're kind of going to slowly grow, and people realizing like, wow, the reason he is so good is because he knows where his creativity and the gift is coming from, versus just like, I'm just doing it because I want to be a Catholic designer and design Catholic things for Catholic stuff all the time, and that's kind of the focus of it. And I think if we do that, I think that's kind of the biggest place for me, at least, in terms of like growing in it.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off that, we talk a lot about, we kind of play this, I guess, word game. Is something good because it's Catholic, or is something Catholic because it's good? And I think sometimes if this makes sense, or I'll try to make it make sense, in the early 2000s, my wife, she worked for Capitol Records. She worked with a lot of like Seen, the emo bands, stuff like that, Yellow Card and all that. And within that, there's like Christian scene, right? And she would find that a lot of bands would intentionally start as Christian bands because the bar for acceptance was so low. Because the acceptance wasn't based upon your musical abilities, it was based upon the label you put in front of it. We don't like you because you play good music, we like you because you're Christian and I feel this obligation to. And these bands would use this route to then grow in their skill, grow in their fan base, and then launch off out of that arena and become quote unquote secular or whatever. And it was because there was no bar to entry. You got a following because you put a label on what you did. And that's what we mean by like, as a lot of times with art, with creativity, or with whatever, it's not to say that you can't have a specific work vocation that is creating like art in a Catholic context, like what you do, or what Francis does with music, right? It's not to say that that's not it. It's to say a lot of times there's a pressure that if I put the word Catholic on what I do, that's where it gets value. And I think what we are trying to say is actually you being a Catholic and doing whatever you're doing really good is what makes it Catholic. You know, and this example we throw around a lot is the wedding at Cana, right? And there's this really cool evangelical author. His name's Erwin McManus. I can't, but he's an artist, very profound guy. But he wrote this book, and in there he talks about the wedding at Cana, and he says like. Did you notice that when Jesus, first of all, remember the story, right? Maybe you woke up at Mass one day and the priest is reading the gospel, right? They ran out of wine at the wedding, and then Mary says, like, Jesus, they ran out of wine, and then she tells the servants, do whatever he tells you. Jesus tells the servants to fill these 6 stone jars with water, right? Which is like a ton of wine, a ton of water at that point. And then Jesus says, draw some out, take it to the head waiter. And when the head waiter tasted it turned to wine, and not just wine, it was the best wine the head waiter's ever tasted. And his job is to taste wine. Like, that's what he does as part of this wedding, right? So he knew wine. He's like, holy crap, like, this is amazing. And he comments on that. And then Erwin says, do you notice that when the jars of wine went out, Jesus didn't put like a label on there, right? Like God wine or Jesus juice. Like there was nothing on there that would, you know, like, well, I want to make sure they know it's from me. Right? I want to make sure they know it's Catholic wine. No, because Jesus was confident in what he made that people would wonder where it came from. And I think that's what, like, where I know I've failed is when I've put all my value in what I'm doing on the label and and frankly hidden behind the label and not so much on perfecting and doing something really, really well and having the freedom and the fearlessness to even say, like, when it doesn't need a label, it doesn't need a label. And let them encounter something true, good, and beautiful, and then wonder where to come from. You know, as a small example, I was working in the parish, and we were doing this big adoration event, and I spent weeks on this design, far too long, and it was all like super like Eucharist, because that's what it was, adoration event. And I went to my wife, because I hated the design. But I knew that if she loved me enough, she wouldn't tell me that she hated it too. And if she told me it was true, then I could go with it, right? And I brought it to my wife, and I was like, look what do you think? And it's like full, Eucharist, and just, you know what I mean? Like it was just painfully like adoration, right? And which was not the audience, it was for a bunch of teens. And she looks at it and she goes, I was like,
My wife does the same thing.
Until death do us part. What the heck? You know what I mean? And she's like, honestly, it just doesn't do it. And I was like, well, first I was pissed because I was, and then but I was pissed because she was right. And I was trying to hide so far behind this. If I just have a Eucharist, then someone's going to like it. It's going to work. And I realized, like, no, like I'm forcing this label into it. And at the expense of actually being a good, fruitful design that would mean something to a teenager. So then we spent a ton of time redesigning it. It actually became something more story-driven and more impactful and compelling to someone who doesn't already have an affinity for the Eucharist. So I think for me, the failures come where I don't see the value in the good I'm doing unless I slap a label on it, right? And that label could be I say I'm a Catholic designer, or that label could be, it has to have a cross. Why doesn't it have a cross in it? You know what I mean? Or why just put a rosary on here and then we're good. It's like, no, if the rosary makes sense, sure, but don't hide behind those. And for me, I want to hide because it's vulnerable to put your best work out and roll the dice.
Right.
You know?
Right. And a lot of times, like, these designs spark that conversation with those people, right? Of like, what is adoration? What is the Eucharist, right? And it doesn't, what we were just saying about NEC, like, it's not overtly like Catholic, right? But it sparks that conversation that a lot of people need to have, right? So that's beautiful.
I would say the other failure, I have a lot, but this sounds weird, and maybe this would be like a red flag warning. I've spent, like I said, I've spent all my life in ministry, and that led to a creative career. And working in ministry has sadly taught me to undervalue creativity, because creativity is often viewed as just a line item. Get crap out, get it out cheap, and right now. And I get that there's maybe appears to be a practical thing, but like as a result, even in the agency, like that's one thing I'm really grateful for Patrick he's coming from an industry that actually values creativity. And there's this like tug of war sometimes of like, and he's like, dude, like this is a good thing for them. And if it's good, then there's a just wage to that. Do you know what I mean? And whether it's undervaluing it for time or even just feeling apologetic for putting a price on something, which I think is sort of a wound from working in ministry, because it is so much that perspective, like, well, we either we get it for free or it's not worth investing in. You know what I mean? So those are the two options. You know what I mean? And then that is something I would throw out to any creative, like, understand the value of creativity, and fair if maybe like you're starting out and you don't feel there's like, your ability to charge or to give this, and I don't even say charge financially, but like if you're bringing something to an equation, to a ministry or to whatever, there should be a value that they see in it, that it takes a place of like intention. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not, even if you're like doing free design, like we're doing some pro bono stuff for some church right now, and it's like we bring this to them, and it's like, okay, cool, well we're gonna do this, this, and this, and we're like, you know what I mean? It's like a chef brings you some sort of, and you're just like picking out all the things. No, those things are there because like they're a part of the flavoring, And I think so. That's what I would say in terms of like valuing creativity, like figuring out how to, I guess, affirm the gift of trying to bring your best in creativity. And understand, I guess, see the worth and the value in that. And the church historically valued that excellently, So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's all our prayer, right, that the church continues to grow in that. I think it also, pray that there's increased trust in creatives as well, right? I think there's like a sense of control sometimes of like, I wish that there was a monstrance on there, right? Like you were just talking about. But I pray, and I think for a lot of creatives, that's our prayer, right? That there's that increased trust by the church, and that there's increased like creative freedom in that.
Yeah.
Right.
You should write into your contracts like a $1,000 monstrance charge. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just standard for all creative work. Like, you wanted the monstrance package.
A monstrance
well, that's
fee.
going to tack on, actually. Yeah.
A monstrance fee.
Yeah, monstrance fee.
Or a cross fee.
Yeah, a monstrance fee. Perfect.
Great. Well, I wanted to open up the floor to the students. If you guys have any questions for David and PG, would love to open up the floor to you guys if you have any questions, to raise your hand. I'm sure they have a lot to share and a lot of knowledge to share, so I want to open up the floor.
Questions, comments, donations?
No threats, though. Okay, yeah, David will take a threat. But.
Yeah, I'm all hopped up on Joe Rogan Alpha Brain right now, so bring it, people.
Yeah.
Kind of working with a very similar field like sports and all that. How are you able to balance like keeping your faith first as well as like the morals and your values as well?
He doesn't have any. No, I'm just kidding.
It's a little interesting for me because I personally had my kind of conversion to Catholicism. I grew up Catholic, but not very devout or committed to it. But I started working in advertising and in kind of the secular industry before I had my conversion of faith. It actually partially led to it when I was living in San Francisco and I was working in advertising. I started working in advertising when I was like a sophomore, junior in college. So my teacher hired me at his agency when I was in college still. And so I worked there through college and a few years after, and kind of got burnt out really fast from like the lifestyle, and it kind of led to my conversion during that time before moving home. But I think for me, obviously, first and foremost is being open. So making sure that, people around, I try not to hide it, obviously, in the secular. I know a lot of us as Catholics, we feel so comfortable when we're around those that we agree with, and we're always around, the Catholic circles. But I think there's a huge, there's such like an awesome perspective that we could bring into the bigger secular culture, especially within brands and working in brands. And I think for me, first of all, even just in selecting where I work, I try to understand the brands that I've worked for or brands that I work with that align with kind of my understanding of, what they do and where my faith stands, but also making sure that, again, I don't hide it. So those the people I work for, or my bosses, or the campaigns that I might work on aren't things that would affect kind of where I stand in my faith. And so, again, it was a little different for me early on when I was first working in advertising, and then even when I first had my conversion and the things that I was doing then versus where it kind of went later. And what's cool is like later on, even like most recently before we started the agency, I was working, my old boss from like my first job when I first came back here to Southern California. He was hired as like the VP of marketing at DC, the shoe company, from like way back in the day, and he kind of brought a bunch of us back to DC to kind of try to rebuild the brand. And so when I came there as the creative director there, it was cool because he understands who I am and where I stand and in my faith and all that. And so being kind of the leader of the creative team, it allowed me to kind of build how that visual and creative language worked and spoke in a way that I could kind of show the truth, beauty, and goodness of where I stand on things through the brand. And I think the more of us that can kind of put ourselves in these secular brands or places in the culture and kind of live out our faith in those places, the more we can have an influence in shifting how the culture, how a brand might do things. And I think for me, doing that, some of the places I've worked has been a really cool experience, because once you've done it for a certain amount of time and you gain that level of trust, and again, this is something where like, it's interesting because you work in a secular company and over time they start to trust you on these things, and the church, it's like you would think they would be the ones who would be there to trust you first and kind of what you want to do creatively, and it's like a harder battle. But I think the more we put ourselves in those situations, the more they understand the goodness and how positive some of these things are, and if we continue to refine our craft and how good we can become as creatives, why would they deny what we have to offer, I guess. And so for me, that was kind of it. It was just kind of being really open, that people understand. And I think if something aligns, being willing to say no to things, I think that's a huge one too for us, especially as Catholic creatives. Like we want to just do everything we can do, but I think there's something positive too about saying no to things that you don't want to do. But I think over time, as you gain that experience, little by little, it starts to grow, and they start to understand who you are and what you stand for, and sometimes they give you the keys to like run with it and let a brand kind of go in a direction that fits what you believe.
One thing that Patrick, he mentioned it earlier, but it's a big focus of his, of like becoming the best at what you're doing. And I think that's a big component. It's like, sure, like keep your life rightly ordered, and know that like, you probably shouldn't go, be a designer at Pornhub if you're trying to live a faith life. Like that's right. But like in a general sense, like you can go work in a quote unquote secular space. But one thing about Patrick, I think, is because he spent so much time thanking God and stewarding the gift of creativity, people admire and respect the wine, right, so to speak, and then that also gives you like that. It's called a callback. That allows him then to like have a sense of value to the company that makes room for this sort of a little bit more autonomy or freedom, or even just conversation to say like, hey, actually, I can't do that particular thing, or I'd prefer not to. And if they ask why, like he brings more to the game than just being like, just run and clip art, basically, because you're replaceable. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's a big thing about like you have a gift and a value to bring, and the more you steward it, the more value God will allow to be revealed to the people around you, and that will cause people, faith or not, to like value what you bring to them, and then that value allows you to be able to sort of create boundaries to whatever degree, and obviously within order. If there's a boundary that gets pushed, like know when to cut and go. And I've met some amazing people who have the courage to do that, and God has provided multiple times over, you know.
So, as someone who also just really values creativity, and especially like the media, social media is like where the young people are at. I bet a lot of people just have the vibe of like, oh, like good content or just like beautiful advertising or marketing is a nice thing to have, but not really necessary. Like, how have you guys actually seen like the impact of like beauty and advertising and marketing on the church, and like to respond to those people like, no, this actually does further the growth of the church. It's not just like a nice thing on the side.
I think the first angle I would take is ask them, are you satisfied with the results that you're getting right now? And chances are, if they're having that conversation with you, they're not. And chances are, if they're honest about their place in ministry, they're not. And then you ask them, cool, what are you doing? And chances are they're going to describe to you this mediocre level. And then I think it's the invitation. Are you willing to try something different to get a different result? Because right now you're doing this and getting the same result. And that's all you're doing. And so if you want a different result, you have to actually try a different thing. And so maybe hear me out. What if we tried actually investing into this and see? I think you can. It's helpful to point out that a lot of times in the church, we do things because we do things because we do things because we did things because we did things, right? And we just do the same thing expecting a different result. And they're like, why is the church empty? Well, do you have the courage to try something new? Because maybe you'll see. It's worth testing, right? I think that's one way I would play. Then I mean, PJ, you could probably speak into this more from like your experience, but like the world is a great analogy for the church in the sense that like let's just say your ministry, your church, you want to draw more teens. Let's find a brand that's drawing teens. What are they doing that's different than what your ministry's doing? Well, it turns out they're investing into social media. They're investing into quality. For them, it's not the icing on the cake, it's the cake, right? And so I think helping the church or whoever it is you're working with to see outside of themselves is maybe a good way to try something new, you know? That's what I would throw out.
Yeah, I would add on. Then again, this is why it's so important to us, kind of that process that happens beforehand. And so I'd say to almost try to develop a process that works for you, that can help, you know, the church or the client kind of understand the reason why they're doing the things that they're doing. Because so many times, like when we've worked with different clients, whether it's parishes, dioceses, or whatever it is, by going through that process that we have, it kind of starts to open their eyes and justify to them, like, wait, I guess we do need to do some of these things, because I'm starting to realize, like, here's all these things that they're saying that they want to target, or people they want to speak to. But before this meeting, you were saying you were trying to target these people. But now we've gone through all these questions, and we've gone through these different exercises, and we've discovered like what you're actually trying to say is something else. And that's what's actually on your heart. And so because of that, here's the things that we can do to do that. And it kind of justifies it. So whatever process, or kind of, again, instead of like jumping straight to what the result is, figure out what that is for you that can help the client understand what they're looking for, so that it almost answers itself for them afterwards.
That's a big thing, I think, about when you're working with a client, figuring out the right way to ask questions or bring them through an exercise that leads them to these conclusions. Because if it's always you insisting your idea and it seems foreign to them, it's always going to be a burden. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a burden. But if you ask questions that lead them to your solution, then it's something that they've arrived at, they've bought in, and many times it's their idea. Great idea. What if we did that with this? And now they're like, yeah, right, it's a great idea. I should work in marketing. Well, no, simmer down, Johnny. Okay, like we'll handle that. But that's part of, I think, the beauty of having that conversation. As a small example, we're working with the diocese and it's their anniversary. And they brought us in and we were talking with them about like, if y'all just want to do like an anniversary party, that's probably not what we're interested in. But like if you want the anniversary to be a reason why you double down on why your church exists here in this diocese to begin with, like let's party. And they were down for that. So we had this big discovery day, went through all these questions, this kind of format to help them understand who are you, this event, what's the identity of this event, who's your audience, why do they need this event, why does it matter? And then ultimately we got to this conclusion that this event, this year-long campaign was going to be to re-engage disengaged Catholics. So then we're at the end of the day and we asked them, great, if this year-long event is successful and you've re-engaged disengaged Catholics, where do they go? And the vicar was like, there's about 2 churches I would recommend that they go to. And we'll see, that's the problem. And the vicar, and I love this, the vicar is like a big, powerful guy in the diocese. He says, the people will be going back to the exact same thing they rejected to begin with. So then the decision made the vicar go, why would we spend a year on this campaign? And if it's successful, we bring people back to the church and send them into a parish that they're going to leave again. So then it made them say, we're going to pause this year-long effort and preface it with a year-long effort of internal renewal and an internal rebrand of all the parishes in the diocese so they're ready to be these new wineskins to receive the new wine at the end of that second year, right? But that we didn't come in and say, hey, we want to turn your anniversary into a 2-year campaign. We just asked the questions, and they led to these conclusions of, because they wouldn't have thought it's our anniversary, what value is there to do an evangelistic campaign? But questions and questions lead to answers. And most people in ministry, especially priests, they're not there for the fun of it. They laid down on an altar and gave up their lives for this thing. And if you can get to the heart of that in these questions, well, then ultimately, they're probably not settled with, what if we just did the bare minimum, Padre? Right? What if we just kept doing what you did for the last 30 years and called it good? And so I think to sum that up to what Patrick's saying is having a framework, a conversation to lead them to what their vision is, then the vision is, okay, well, how do we rise to that? If their vision is we want to inspire teens the way so-and-so does, great, let's look at what so-and-so is doing. Looks like so-and-so isn't doing what you're insisting we do. What if we tried what so-and-so was doing, you know?
That question, Mary.
Sorry.
We have time for one more question.
So just to make sure I heard, what's your advice for someone that has 0 connections and wants to network into like creative industries and stuff? Do you breakdance? No. Me neither, so that's okay. That wasn't even one of the prerequisites. It was just wanting to know. Because Francis, he breakdances. Side note, he actually was a part of a breaking crew back in the like late 80s, early 90s. But that's for another night. Don't let this guy catch some cardboard on the floor. That's what I'm saying. All right. I would say you're in a way, like back in the day, if you had an interest, you became like an apprentice. And that was a cool thing. You kind of worked into that. I think there are still opportunities like that, but I think in this day and age, you have access digitally to a bunch of different groups. And I think it's really just about putting yourself out there and being okay being awkward, be okay being new, be okay not knowing design. I think sometimes you go into a creative place and you're like, oh, I can't go because I'm not that good. No, go in there and be like, man, you all are so good. Like, I'm just starting. I would love to learn. And I think there's a lot of places on social media for that, whether it's a Facebook group or some other kind of connection. And then also, like, what's cool, you guys are in the heart of, obviously, a very vibrant city. There are different creative media, like this right here. You know, there are different things that you can just go be present at. It takes courage. It takes kind of getting out of your comfort zone. But I think if you want it, there are so many avenues to at least put yourself out there, you know? And the other thing, this is more from like a maybe design standpoint, is like, one thing a lot of designers do is they design, like, they don't wait to get hired to design something. They create their own projects, and it becomes a passion, and they put a lot of work into it, and then that becomes this sort of faux portfolio, and they get it out there, and you can start asking for critique, this, that, and the other. You don't have to wait to get paid to do something. Pay yourself with some sweat equity, make some cool projects, put it out there, ask for critique, and eventually you're going to start finding these connections, I think.
Yeah.
If you don't break dance.
Yeah. Same thing like David said. I think just putting yourself out there and sometimes even finding something unique, like do something in person. If there's like here in LA, if there's like a brand or a company that you think is cool, I'm sure all these creative directors would love it if you just showed up there with something that showcased your work or something to show them, and you drop it off, you do something cool, and you leave it for them. You ask for critique, like David said. These things stand out all the time. Like when I was working with DC or Oakley, like all the time you'd guess of like, this guy came, he dropped this off at the front. And it's like some like crazy branded box of donuts that's like from some fake donut company. You open it, it's like their portfolio inside with all these different things that branded to look like a donut shop, whatever. But when you get that, you remember this person, and then next time you need some like a creative, or next time you want to mentor someone, you're going to think about this person. And I think doing stuff like that, especially like David said, there's all these avenues now online, putting yourself out there, but then also finding that random thing in person starts to stand out more because there's so many things online that you could do now. So if you can think creatively, work on a random project, fake something, and get it out there, it stands out for sure. And I think stuff like that is what really works now, especially in like the secular world. Again, depending on kind of the direction, but I know for me, those types of things always stood out all the time.
Awesome. Thank you guys for your questions. Thank you to PG and David for coming out tonight. Let's give them a round of applause. Really awesome.
Security!
Okay.
I was just say one thing. We have some shirts and some stickers. Those are not for sale. They're for free. So feel free, if you're interested, to grab one. You won't hurt our feelings if you don't. If you need to wipe up your counter floor, you can grab one. I don't know. But the shirts are just for agency, and the stickers as well. And one of the things I'll just point out, one of the stickers says good things for good reasons. And that's really the philosophy of like, and not good as in like, oh, cool, but good as in like true, good, and beautiful, right? To do good things for good reasons. And that can happen in a Catholic church context or working for a donut shop. And I think that's really like that, you bring the Catholic to that. And it's you doing it really good is what makes it Catholic. So, but feel free at the end to go ahead and grab one per person. Yeah, thank you all for hanging out. Appreciate it.
And you guys have an Instagram, right, that they could follow as well?
Yeah. We are Seen and Unseen.
Great.
We are Seen and Unseen.
Awesome.
We don't update it enough, but it's there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Come hang out.
Well, thank you guys, and thank you to all you guys for coming tonight. God bless, and fight on.
You're right.